1652, September 14, 1942. Stalingrad-1 Railway Station, Stalingrad. The station clock is either shattered or frozen. No one inside can tell which. The only time anyone trusts is the one shouted by runners and the one felt in the rhythm of impacts. Mortar rounds, then tank fire, then the long tearing sound of machine guns. Guard Sergeant Mikhail Pankratov, 24 years old, is pressed against a brick wall that still holds heat from an earlier fire. He is a squad leader, an infantry NCO, pulled from the 13th Guards Rifle Division and pushed forward with a single clear order: take the station and hold it. Not a symbol. Not a rally point. A piece of ground with tracks, platforms, ticket halls, and shattered cars. A place that controls movement and lines of sight in a city being cut into isolated compartments. He is not alone. Around him are roughly 100 guardsmen, some fully formed squads, others a stitched-together collection of survivors, runners, and replacements. Many are armed the same way: the PPSh-41 submachine gun, wood stock, stamped steel receiver, a 71-round drum locked under the action. The weapon is heavy for what it is, around 3.6 kilograms empty, noticeably more when loaded, but it brings a specific kind of authority inside buildings. It fires 7.62 by 25 mm Tokarev pistol cartridges. At close range, those rounds arrive fast and flat. The PPSh cycles at roughly 900 rounds per minute. It is not subtle. It is not economical. It is decisive in tight spaces. At 1654, a runner arrives from the rear, stumbling on broken glass and ballast stones. He doesn't deliver a speech. He delivers a direction. The Germans are already inside the station complex. They took it earlier. They lost it. They took it again. The station is changing hands like an object passed back and forth in a fistfight. Pankratov checks his men by touch and glance. Faces are dark with soot. Helmets are dented. Eyes look too dry. He counts magazines and drums like a bookkeeper. He has one drum seated, one drum tied in a cloth sling, and loose cartridges in paper packets. The men behind him are similar: PPShs, a few Mosin-Nagant rifles, at least one DP-27 light machine gun with its dinner plate pan magazine, and bundles of grenades that clink faintly when they move. At 1657, the fire begins to shift. Soviet artillery on the east bank of the Volga cannot see the station clearly through smoke, but it can blanket grid squares. German weapons reply from angles that reveal their method: MG-34 and MG-42 bursts that pin down movement, and the heavier, slower impacts of tank guns used like sledgehammers against masonry. Inside Stalingrad, this is how territory is measured now. Not in kilometers, but in doorways and stairwells. 1703. The approach at 1703, Pankratov's group moves. They do not advance in a clean line. They thread between wrecked rail cars and collapsed awnings, staying low, crossing open ground in short runs. The ground is uneven, ballast stones shift under boots, and twisted metal catches webbing straps. A station is not just a building. It is a geometry problem. To the west are rail lines and yards, clear lanes that favor machine guns. To the east, the city rises in broken blocks and smoking lots. The main station building sits like a bunker with windows turned into firing ports by destruction. Platforms create long corridors. Undercrofts and service tunnels form blind arteries where two squads can collide at arm's length. At 1706, a German burst snaps across the platform edge. The round strike sparks off rail. A guardsman to Pankratov's right drops, not dramatically, just abruptly, as if his legs have been removed from the plan. Two men drag him behind a baggage cart. There is no medic. Not here. Not now. Pankratov looks toward the entrance hall. He can see movement behind a fractured archway. He cannot identify uniforms at this distance through dust. He does not waste time trying. He signals with his left hand. Two men left, one DP-27 to cover, grenades first. This is the new sequence in Stalingrad: grenade, burst, move. 1711. The weapon and the room at 1711, the first grenade goes in. It bounces off stone and disappears into shadow. The explosion is muffled by thick walls, but the sound still slaps the ear. Immediately after, the guardsmen surge forward. PPSh fire is not a single sound. It's a staccato tearing, a zipper of impacts that drives enemies away from openings and forces heads down. The weapon's advantage is its volume of fire in the first seconds of contact. Its limitation is just as clear. With that rate of fire, a 71-round drum empties in under 5 seconds if a man holds the trigger. Discipline matters. Short bursts. Controlled angles. Keep the muzzle level. Pankratov moves through a doorway and sees the station interior in flashes. A ticket counter smashed flat, a staircase half collapsed, signage hanging by wires like broken limbs. A German soldier appears near a pillar, close enough that Pankratov can see the outline of a helmet and the pale crescent of a face. At 17:12, Pankratov fires a burst, 3-4 rounds, and the man disappears behind the pillar. Another burst follows, aimed at where feet should be. The guards are fighting inside a building that is no longer a building. It is a collection of angles, ruins, and lethal distances. 1718. Why the station matters at 1718. The narration pulls back for a moment, because this station is not an accident. It sits at the center of Stalingrad's connectivity. Whoever controls Stalingrad, one can shift men along the tracks, stage attacks into adjacent blocks, and cut off defenders with fire-down platform lanes. The Germans know it. They are not attacking because they love railways. They are attacking because railways create routes, and routes create pressure, and pressure collapses defense. The larger context is already written into the city's rubble. In the summer of 1942, the German campaign in the south drives toward the Volga. Sixth Army pushes into Stalingrad with the goal of cutting Soviet transport and breaking the industrial backbone of the region. The Soviet response is brutal and immediate. Hold the river line, keep the city as an anvil that can absorb German strength while reserves build elsewhere. Stalingrad becomes not just a battle, but an equation of endurance. The 13th Guards Rifle Division, commanded by Major General Alexander Rodimtsev, is thrown into the city as emergency reinforcement. Guards is not a decorative title. It signals units recognized for combat performance, often better equipped and held to harder expectations. Their arrival is not a parade. It is a crossing under fire, a rush into a furnace, and then immediate counterattack into blocks already being consumed. Back inside the station, those strategic intentions compress into something smaller, a man counting his remaining drums. 1723. Ammunition, reloads, and the cost of seconds. At 1723, Pankratov's second drum is already half gone. That is the truth of submachine gun combat. Fire buys time, but it also spends your future. Reloading a drum is slower than swapping a box magazine. A man must keep the gun stable, release the drum, seat the new one correctly, and then reacquire the target in a space where targets appear without warning. One of Pankratov's men, barely older than 19, fumbles a drum and drops it. It clatters on tile, loud enough to draw attention. Pankratov does not shout. He kicks the drum into cover with his boot and yanks the soldier down behind a column. At 1725, the DP-27 opens up from the doorway, its slower, heavier rhythm anchoring the squad's movement. The DP's Pan magazine holds 47 rounds. It is reliable, but bulky. The gunner fires in bursts to avoid overheating and to conserve ammunition that is already being carried forward by exhausted men rather than trucks. A Soviet runner appears at 1727 with a warning. German armor is probing closer. Tanks in Stalingrad do not always fight tanks. They fight buildings. They use high explosive to blow holes that infantry can exploit. They fire down corridors. They crush cover by weight alone. Pankratov feels his throat tighten. The station's walls might resist small arms, but not repeated direct hits. Every defender knows what a tank shell does to a room full of men. It turns the room into fragments. 1731. The counterattack hits the wall at 1731. A new burst of fire erupts from the far side of the entrance hall. The sound is sharper, more aggressive. German infantry are pushing back into the building, using their own cover and angles. The station is about to become what it has already been all day, a place where control lasts minutes, not hours. Pankratov looks at the faces nearest him. He makes a quick decision that will shape who survives the next 10 minutes. He splits his group. Half will hold the corridor and stop a flank. Half will push toward the central hall where the Germans are concentrating. He signals with 2 fingers, then points, then clenches his fist. Simple gestures that do not require shouting over gunfire. At 17:34, he pulls a grenade from his pouch, checks the fuse by feel, and steps toward the opening. He does not know whether this push will reclaim the station or simply add his men to the dead already scattered along the platforms. He only knows the order. Hold. 17:34, September 14, 1942. Inside the entrance hall, Stalingrad-1. Pankratov steps into the opening and throws the grenade low. It skips once across tile, disappears behind a broken ticket counter, and detonates with a hard, flat crack that punches dust out of the walls. The blast is small compared to artillery, but in a confined hall it becomes a pressure event. Splinters, fragments, and concussion. Men flinch even when they don't want to. At 17:35, he rushes forward with 2 guardsmen tight behind him. They move as a unit, muzzles forward, shoulders hunched. The PPSh-41s are set for short bursts, not sprays. The goal is not noise. The goal is hits. A German soldier appears near the stairwell, too close for careful aiming. Pankratov fires a burst. The recoil climbs, and he forces it back down with the heel of his hand and a locked forearm. The Tokarev rounds crack into plaster and wood, tearing a seam across the stair rail. The German drops out of view. At 17:36, another German shape flashes at the edge of a doorway. Pankratov's second man fires. The PPSH's muzzle flash lights the dust. The sound is loud enough to feel in the teeth. The German disappears again, but the return fire starts immediately. Controlled bursts, likely from a rifle or an MP-40, aimed at the doorway they just used. This is the pattern now. Movement measured in 2-second decisions, outcomes decided by who is faster at the first shot. 17:39. Tactical reality in a concrete box at 17:39. The firefight expands. There are at least 3 separate points of contact inside the station. One at the entrance hall, one along the platforms, and one somewhere below, service bases, tunnels, or basements. The defenders don't have a full map. They have fragments of information passed by runners and the direction of gunfire. Pankratov's split squad is working as intended. The holding group pins down a German push along a side corridor, firing across a narrow angle that forces attackers to hug cover. The forward group presses into the hall to disrupt German momentum before heavier weapons arrive. But the station does not allow clean tactics. Lines of fire are interrupted by rubble. Echoes distort direction. Smoke makes distance uncertain. Even a trained infantryman can fire at the wrong shadow. At 17:41, Pankratov hears the distinct, faster, longer rip of a German machine gun, an MG-42 or MG-34 firing from deeper inside. The bursts come in short strings, disciplined, covering a doorway. The Germans are not panicking. They are doing what they've done in every urban fight, locking down movement corridors while small groups attempt to flank. Pankratov changes plan in seconds. He directs one man to pull back and throw smoke, if they have it, into the hall to obscure that machine gun sight line. If they don't have smoke, they'll use dust, shoot into the ceiling plaster and let the building blind itself. At 17:43, a guardsman rips open a door and fires upward into a hanging section of plaster. The ceiling sheds debris like snowfall. Visibility drops. It's crude, but it works. The machine gun's bursts pause, recalibrate, and then start again with less certainty. 17:46. The PPSh-41 up close at 17:46. The narration slows for a technical beat, because weapons matter here in a way they do not in open field war. The PPSh-41 is built for this environment. Its rate of fire creates a high probability of hits in short windows, doorway exposures, stairwells, and rooms where targets appear within 10 to 30 meters. The Tokarev cartridge penetrates light cover, and its velocity helps it stay stable through smoke and dust. But it is not perfect. The drum magazine is bulky. Seating it under stress is a learned skill. A poorly fitted drum can cause feeding issues, and the gun's rate of fire punishes the careless. A man who holds the trigger empties his combat load in moments and becomes a spectator. In Stalingrad, spectators die. That's why Pankratof's control matters. He is not a hero in the cinematic sense. He is a manager of seconds and ammunition. 1749. The Germans push in at 1749. German infantry surge. They use the moment of reduced visibility to close distance. Boots scrape on tile. Voices carry, short commands, urgent, low. A grenade comes in from the far side and bounces twice. Pankratof's instinct is immediate. He shoves his nearest man behind a column and dives the other direction. The grenade detonates at 1750, throwing fragments that hiss through dust. The column catches the worst of it. When Pankratov comes up, his ears are ringing and the hall has shifted. More debris, less clarity. At 1751, he sees a German at arm's length near a doorway, rifle up. Pankratov does not aim. He fires a burst from the hip. The German collapses backward, and the doorway becomes a choke point, an opening that now draws fire from both sides. This is where the last stand begins to form, not because anyone announces it, but because the building forces it. The station's defenders are shrinking into pockets. Communication is collapsing. Each pocket is fighting its own small war. 1756. Platforms as killing lanes at 1756. The holding group reports, by runner, breathless, that German fire is sweeping the platforms. The platforms are long, straight corridors with minimal cover. A machine gun firing down a platform turns it into a funnel. Bodies can't be retrieved. Ammunition can't be carried forward without losses. Pankratov recognizes what that means. If the Germans lock down the platforms and take the stairwell, they will cut the station into isolated compartments and then reduce them one by one. At 1758, he orders his forward group to shift to the right side passage and attempt a short, violent push toward the platform edge, just enough to break the machine gun's angle. Not to clear the platform completely. Not to chase. Just to disrupt. He leads it himself. Not because he wants to, but because he understands momentum. Men follow motion. They follow certainty. In a building like this, hesitation is contagious. At 1801, they move. They sprint across a strip of open floor. Rounds snap and chip the wall behind them. One guardsman stumbles, catches himself, keeps going. Pankratov reaches the corner first and fires a burst toward the machine gun's suspected position. Muzzle flash, echo, then a brief pause in the incoming fire. The pause is not victory. It is a window. At 1802, a guardsman throws a grenade down the platform lane. The explosion is distant, but it breaks the rhythm of the German gunfire. That's all they needed. 1805. The station as a trap at 1805, the broader situation tightens. Stalingrad is not one battle. It is dozens of simultaneous battles, overlapping and interfering. Units are intermingled. Front lines exist in stairwells. A building can be held on the first floor while the enemy is in the basement. A room can be defended for hours and then lost in 30 seconds. Rodimtsev's division is paying for every meter with men. Pankratov feels it in his hands. The PPSh's fore end is hot. His palms are gritty with brick dust and dried sweat. He checks his drum, light now. He swaps it with the second drum at 1807, taking care to seat it properly. He slaps it once to confirm lock. He does not look down for long. Looking down gets you killed. At 1809, he hears the heavier sound again, the tank gun. Not inside the hall yet, but close enough that the building trembles with each shot. A German tank, likely a Panzer III or IV, fires into the station facade. The effect is immediate. Brick and plaster explode inward. A doorway becomes a crater. A hallway becomes an open wound. At 1811, a Soviet soldier, unknown unit, face cut and bleeding, stumbles into Pankratof's pocket with a report. The Germans are bringing armor right up to the station and using it to breach. The defenders' anti-tank weapons are limited. If they have PTRD or PTRS anti-tank rifles, they're hard to maneuver inside. Grenades can disable a tank only under specific conditions: close approach, track damage, engine deck vulnerability. And close approach means exposure. Pankratov does not pretend he can stop a tank with courage. He thinks in obstacles. 1814. A pocket becomes a last stand at 1814. He orders his men to fall back deeper into the station interior where the tank cannot bring its gun to bear effectively. He chooses a spot with narrow access routes, a corridor that bends twice, a doorway that can be covered from two angles, a stairwell that can be blocked. This is not retreat. This is shaping the fight. At 1816, they drag furniture, broken benches, a metal luggage rack, a chunk of door frame, into a makeshift barricade. The barricade will not stop bullets. It will force the attackers to slow down and present themselves in predictable positions. At 1818, the first German probes hit the new barrier. A helmet appears. A hand throws a grenade. The grenade lands short and detonates, showering the barricade with fragments. No one flinches this time. They are past flinching. At 1820, Pankratov leans out, fires a 2-second burst, and ducks back. He hears a German shout. He hears Boots retreat. He hears the machine gun resume farther back. It is a measured contest of distance and nerve. And now the station is doing what the station always does, turning 100 men into an island. At 1823, Pankratov counts heads in his pocket. Fewer than before. Ammunition is down to what is in the guns and what is in pouches. They have minutes, not hours, if the pressure stays constant. He looks at his men and gives the simplest order he can. Hold this corner. Hold this stair. Do not let them through. 1823, September 14th, 1942. Interior corridor, Stalingrad 1. Pankratov's pocket is now a barricade, a bent corridor, and a stairwell. The station has stripped the fight down to geometry and nerves. He stations one man at the stairbase with grenades laid out like tools, pins pre-bent, bodies cleaned of grime so they won't slip. Another man kneels behind the luggage rack with a PPSh, muzzle aligned with the doorway gap. A third holds the DP-27, its pan magazine pressed against his chest like a shield. At 1826, German voices rise again. Boots scrape. Something metallic clinks, equipment, maybe a dropped entrenching tool. A helmet appears at the doorway's edge, then vanishes. The Germans are testing angles, trying to draw fire and identify positions. Pankratov does not shoot at the first glimpse. He waits for commitment. At 1828, the first grenade comes in. It bounces off the barricade's edge and rolls into the corridor. The man at the stairwell reacts instantly. He kicks it back with the side of his boot, not cleanly, but far enough. The blast detonates behind the doorway, closer to the Germans than to the guards. The detonation is followed by a brief silence as both sides reassess. At 1829, Pankratov fires, 2 short bursts through the doorway gap, aimed at knee height. The rounds crack and spark off stone. A German cries out. Another yells a command. Then the German fire answers, rifle shots and a machine gun burst that whips down the corridor and punches into the barricade. The luggage rack shudders as rounds hit. It won't stop bullets, but it breaks lines of sight. That is the only kind of protection they have left. 1834. Ammunition is a clock at 1834. The DP-27 gunner whispers that he is down to 1 pan. The DP's value is not its volume of fire, it's its control. A burst from the DP pins an enemy behind a doorway in a way PPSh fire sometimes doesn't, because the DP's rhythm suggests endurance. But endurance requires ammunition, and ammunition is disappearing. Pankratov checks his own drum by feel, light. He has maybe a third left. A PPSh drum, when full, is heavy and reassuring. When it's nearly empty, it feels like a warning. At 1836, a runner arrives from somewhere deeper in the station, bleeding from the scalp, carrying a bundle of loose ammunition and 2 grenades. He drops them into Pankratof's hands without ceremony. The runner's message is simple and grim. Other pockets are being crushed. The Germans have armor outside and infantry pressing inside. The platforms are still swept by machine gun fire. There is no clean route. Pankratov doesn't ask for more. Asking is pointless. He distributes what he has: cartridges to those who can use them, grenades to the stairwell man, a few rounds to the DP gunner. He keeps 1 grenade for himself. 1841. The second assault at 1841, the Germans commit again. This time they don't probe. They push. A German soldier lunges through the doorway, grenade in hand. The stairwell man fires first, a short PPSh burst that snaps into the man's torso. The grenade drops. It skitters forward. At 1842, Pankratov dives and grabs it. It is hot and slick. He does not think about fuse time in a measured way. He thinks in a single instinctive calculation. If it detonates here, the pocket collapses. He throws it back through the doorway. It detonates almost immediately, close enough that Pankratov feels the pressure in his chest even from behind the barricade. Dust pours down from the ceiling. A chunk of plaster slams into his shoulder. He grits his teeth and stays upright. At 1844, German fire pauses again, then resumes with more discipline. A machine gun begins firing from farther back, trying to rake the doorway gap without exposing the crew. Riflemen fire into the corridor, aiming not to hit, but to keep heads down while someone else moves. Pankratov understands the tactic. He has seen it before in training, and he has learned it here by surviving it. The Germans are trying to fix them in place, then collapse the pocket with grenades and a rush. He counters with the only tools available. At 1846, he orders the DP-27 to fire a sustained burst, longer than normal, into the doorway. The DP barks, the pan magazine rocking slightly as the gun cycles. The sustained fire forces the German machine gun crew to duck back and breaks the rhythm of their suppression. That buys a window. At 1847, Pankratov and 1 guardsman rush the doorway, throw 2 grenades in quick succession, and fall back before the blasts. The explosions thump, and for a moment the corridor belongs to no one. 1852. The broader battle tightens at 1852. The narration pulls back again. In mid-September, Stalingrad is a city of isolated defense points. Factories, apartment blocks, stairwells, and basements. The Volga behind the defenders is both a lifeline and a boundary. Reinforcements can cross, but only under fire. Ammunition can arrive, but only if boats and men survive the crossing. The Germans are trying to reach the river. The Soviets are trying to deny it 1 building at a time. The station fight matters because it is a hinge. It links the central city to movement corridors. It is also a psychological marker. Both sides know its name. Both sides can point to it on a map. That makes it a magnet for attacks. Back inside, it is not a magnet. It is a trap. 1903. Smoke and a change in light. At 1903, the station's interior light changes. Fires outside dim as smoke thickens. The sun is lowering, but the city doesn't go dark. It glows, small fires, burning timbers, and the intermittent flash of muzzle fire. Pankratov's men are coated in soot. Their breathing is shallow, partly from exertion, partly from the instinct to stay quiet. Everyone is listening for the next rush. At 1906, another tank round hits the station exterior. The building shudders. Dust drops. A section of wall somewhere collapses with a deep, grinding sound that echoes down the corridors. That collapse changes the fight without anyone intending it. It opens a new route, a new breach, a new angle. At 1908, German footsteps appear from a side passage that didn't exist 10 minutes earlier. A German squad, 4 or 5 men, emerges through dust and broken brick, appearing at close range. This is the moment where training becomes reflex. Pankratov fires first. 2 bursts. The PPSh bucks. The lead German drops. The second man tries to pull back, and the stairwell guardsman throws a grenade into the passage. At 19:09, the grenade detonates. The passage fills with smoke and fragments. The Germans retreat, but not in panic. They retreat like men who will return with a different method. 1914, the pocket shrinks again. At 1914, the DP gunner signals he is out. The last pan is empty. The DP-27 is now dead weight, a club, a symbol, but not a weapon. Pankratov orders it moved behind the barricade anyway. It can still serve as psychological presence if Germans see it. At 1917, a guardsman's PPSh jams briefly. An awkward pause, the bolt half forward. The man slaps the receiver, racks it hard, and gets it cycling again. That half-second feels like an hour. Pankratov sees the fear flash, then harden into focus. At 1919, Pankratov makes a decision that will define the next phase. They cannot hold this pocket indefinitely. Not with dwindling ammunition and no machine gun. They need to link up with another pocket, either deeper inside or toward the platforms, before they are isolated completely. He chooses a direction based on sound and the faint echo of friendly fire. At 1922, he tells his men, prepare to move in one rush. Grenades first. Then the PPShs. Then sprint. No stragglers. No long firefights. A movement operation, not a firefight. At 1925, they execute. 2 grenades go out. The blasts hit. Immediately after, Pankratov leads the rush through the bend, into smoke, across broken tile, past a toppled sign, toward a darker corridor where he believes Soviet fire is coming from. German rounds snap behind them. One man falls, caught mid-step. Another grabs his webbing and drags him 2 meters, then loses grip and keeps going. The calculus is brutal and automatic. At 1928, they slam into a new pocket, another cluster of guardsmen behind a collapsed wall, faces streaked with sweat and blood, weapons raised in reflex until they recognize uniforms. There is no celebration. Just a shared understanding that they have bought more minutes. Pankratov leans into the wall, chest heaving, eyes scanning the corridor they came from. He does not know if the station is held in any official sense. He knows only that they are still inside it, still resisting, still forcing the Germans to pay for every meter. At 1931, the German machine gun starts again, closer this time. And Pankratov tightens his grip on the PPSh-41, counting his remaining rounds like a man counting the last matches in a storm. 1931, September 14th, 1942. Inner Corridor Junction, Stalingrad 1. The machine gun is closer now, and the sound is different inside the station, sharper, amplified by masonry. The new pocket Pankratov has joined is larger, but not safer. It has a better barricade, a collapsed brick wall that forms a chest-high parapet, and a side room that can serve as a casualty corner and ammunition point. Someone has set up a crude field of fire with chalk marks on the wall, angles that cover doorways, a stairwell, and a narrow service passage. At 1934, the senior man in the pocket, an older guards lieutenant, face gray with fatigue, gives Pankratov a quick status report in 5 sentences. The station is contested. The Germans hold parts of the platforms. Soviet pockets hold parts of the interior. Outside, German armor is still firing into the facade. Soviet artillery is still striking the station approaches when it can. No one has a complete picture. No one expects relief soon. Pankratov checks his weapon again. The PPSh-41's barrel jacket is hot enough to sting through cloth. He has less than a drum left. The lieutenant assigns him to the right side passage, the most likely route for a close-range rush. At 1941, German infantry probes begin again. This time the Germans use a different rhythm, short bursts, then silence, then a sudden grenade. The goal is to force defenders to reveal positions and to exhaust their reactions. At 1944, a grenade rolls into the corridor and stops against a brick fragment. A guardsman kicks it back. It detonates in the passage, and the Germans answer with a rush that lasts 3 seconds. Pankratov fires 2 controlled bursts at 1945, aiming low, using the passage's narrow width to maximize effect. One German drops. Another retreats. The rush collapses as quickly as it began. The station holds, again, because it cannot be taken cleanly. Every advance is cut into pieces by walls, smoke, and men who refuse to move. 20:03, the station's center breaks and reforms at 20:03, another tank round hits. Somewhere nearby, a ceiling beam fails. The crash is heavy, and the dust surge is immediate. Two corridors that were separate become connected by rubble. A new angle opens that neither side intended. Within minutes, small arms fire begins through that gap as both sides test it. The lieutenant makes a decision at 20:07, consolidate. He orders the pocket to abandon one side room to avoid being flanked through the new breach. Men move quietly, dragging ammunition boxes, pulling wounded, carrying rifles by the barrel to keep muzzles from clattering against masonry. Pankratov helps move a wounded guardsman at 20:09, a man with a bandaged thigh who can still hold a pistol but cannot walk. There is no stretcher. Two men hook arms under his shoulders, and he hops, grimacing, as they shift him behind the new parapet. At 20:12, German fire surges again, and for several minutes the corridor becomes a blunt exchange, burst for burst, grenade for grenade. There are no speeches, no slogans, just the measured work of keeping weapons firing and keeping men in position. 20:28, a weapon runs dry at 20:28, Pankratov's last drum empties. The change is abrupt, recoil without results, then the hollow click of a bolt cycling on an empty feed. In a normal engagement, a man would reload. In Stalingrad, a man with nothing in the gun becomes a liability. Pankratov pulls back behind the parapet, strips the drum, and discovers he has only loose cartridges, insufficient to refill a drum by hand under fire. Someone shoves a Mosin Nagant into his hands at 20:31, likely taken from a fallen soldier. 5-round internal magazine. Bolt action. Not ideal inside a railway station, but a weapon that can still kill. He tests the bolt once, chambering around at 20:32. The rifle feels long and awkward in these corridors. But it forces a different kind of discipline. One shot, then movement, then another shot. At 20:36, the Germans attempt a deeper push. A German squad appears at the edge of visibility, using the smoke as cover. Pankratov takes a knee, sights the Mosin through dust, and fires at 20:37. The shot cracks louder than the submachine guns. The recoil is sharper. A German stumbles and disappears. The lieutenant nods once. Not praise. Confirmation. 21:10. The line holds without knowing it holds by 21:10. The station is a set of disconnected strongpoints. What held means is unclear. The Germans cannot sweep the interior clean without suffering unacceptable losses at every doorway. The Soviets cannot fully clear the platforms while armor and machine guns dominate the long lanes. So the battle settles into a grinding equilibrium where territory is measured in meters and minutes. At 21:26, a runner from deeper inside arrives with a critical message. Other Soviet elements are counterattacking toward the station from adjacent blocks, attempting to reconnect pockets and establish a continuous line. The runner's face is raw with smoke. He delivers directions, not hope. At 21:40, the counterattack sound becomes audible. Fire moving closer, German bursts shifting, the tone of battle changing as pressure hits the Germans from another angle. At 22:05, the Germans begin a controlled pullback from one interior corridor, not a rout, but a repositioning. The machine gun that has been hammering the passage shifts away. The corridor grows briefly quiet, the kind of quiet that is more threatening than noise. At 22:17, Soviet infantry from another pocket reaches the lieutenant's position. Hand signals. Quick recognition. A link established. Not a victory parade, just a restoration of contact. Pankratov exhales for the first time in what feels like hours. 23:08. The cost becomes visible at 23:08. The station interior is briefly calm enough to see what daylight and noise have hidden. Bodies in corners, blood in shallow pools, weapons abandoned where hands stopped working. The stench is smoke, cordite, and the sour edge of fear. Pankratov walks the corridor with the lieutenant at 23:12, checking positions, redistributing ammunition, identifying which men can still fight. He finds 2 of his original squad alive. One is deafened, responding to gestures only. Another has a bandaged forearm and keeps moving as if motion itself is the only defense. There is no accounting for the missing. The missing are simply absent. September 15th. The aftermath inside the same walls. 2:20, September 15th, 1942. Stalingrad 1. At 2:20, orders come down the line. Hold through dawn. The station will be reinforced as possible. The language is blunt and familiar. Hold. Reinforce. No promises. At 4:55, as the sky begins to pale behind smoke, German fire resumes in bursts, then fades again. The station is still contested, and will remain contested. It will change hands again. That is the truth of the place. Pankratov does not experience the battle as a clean arc with a clear ending. For him, it becomes a memory of corridors, a sequence of timestamps and decisions, and the weight of a submachine gun that eventually ran empty. What it changed in him weeks later, Pankratov is no longer the same squad leader who entered the station at 1652. He has learned a new kind of leadership, not inspiring speeches, but ammunition discipline, angles of fire, and the brutal logic of when to move and when to stay. He is promoted, not because paperwork is smooth in Stalingrad, but because surviving NCOs are rare and necessary. He begins instructing replacements on the realities of urban combat: grenades before entry, short bursts, cross-coverage on doorways, and the necessity of carrying ammunition in ways that survive crawling and rubble. The PPSh-41 becomes, in his mind, not a symbol of Soviet industry but a tool that saved men when used correctly and killed men when used carelessly. Later service and post-war life. By the end of the war, Pankratov has moved through other fights: river crossings, ruined towns, forests, and open fields where the Mosin feels normal again and the PPSh becomes secondary. He carries forward the habits burned into him at Stalingrad: constant scanning, measured fire, and the refusal to assume a wall is safe. After the war, he does not become a famous general. He becomes something more common and, in some ways, more influential: a trainer, a quiet veteran who teaches younger soldiers how to survive the first 10 seconds of contact. He studies doctrine, helps write training notes, and corrects myths that turn battles into clean stories. He keeps one thing from Stalingrad: a small station sign fragment, a piece of painted metal, because it reminds him that history is not grand speeches. It is a corridor at 1945 and a decision made without certainty. Legacy, a station, a weapon, and a type of fighting. The story of Stalingrad. One survives because it represents the nature of the battle: close-range combat where submachine guns, grenades, and small unit leadership mattered as much as artillery and tanks. The PPSh-41 becomes one of the war's defining infantry weapons, not because it is elegant, but because it is simple to manufacture and lethal where Stalingrad demanded lethality: inside rooms, stairwells, and shattered stations. And the legacy of men like Pankratov is not just that they held a place. It is that they proved a city could be defended in fragments, that a front line could exist inside a building, and that discipline with a simple weapon could stall an army long enough for the war to change direction. Stalingrad would turn, slowly and brutally, into the point where the momentum of the Eastern Front shifted. But inside the station, on September 14th and 15th, that shift began as something smaller: 100 guardsmen, a railway station, and minutes of fire that refused to end.